30,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, a routine flight was quietly gliding through the night. The cabin lights were dim, most passengers half asleep, and the gentle hum of the engines felt almost comforting. But all of that shattered in an instant. A violent jolt shook the aircraft, overhead bins rattled, and startled passengers shot upright. Then came the sound no traveler ever wants to hear, the captain's voice, trembling with fear, cracking through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, if there is any combat pilot on board, please come forward immediately." The entire cabin froze. People turned their heads in disbelief, some whispering, others holding their breath. Why would a commercial airline need a combat pilot? What was happening inside the cockpit that the captain was too afraid to explain? For a moment, the plane felt suspended, not just in the sky, but in uncertainty. No one moved, no one answered. It seemed as if hope itself was fading until someone in row 10 slowly opened her eyes. She didn't look like a hero. No uniform, no badges, no sign of the life she once lived. Just a young woman in a hoodie, her hair tied back, headphones resting around her neck. Her name was Elena Carter, 29 years old, a former Air Force fighter pilot who had walked away from the sky 2 years earlier. Her past was something she never spoke about. The world knew her as just another traveler trying to disappear among strangers. She boarded this flight hoping for silence, for a small break from the memories that still haunted her. Memories of a mission gone wrong. Faces she couldn't save. A cockpit she swore she would never sit in again. But as the captain's desperate call echoed through the cabin, something inside her shifted. Her heartbeat sped up, her instincts awakened, and the weight of her past pressed against her like a familiar, unwelcome force. For a long second, Elena sat still, wrestling with a promise she had made to herself, the promise to never return to the sky. But the screams from the next wave of turbulence made that promise impossible to keep. She exhaled, steady and slow, unbuckled her seatbelt, and stood up. And just like that, the fate of 300 people changed, because the person everyone least expected, the quiet woman in row 10, was about to reveal a secret powerful enough to save them all. The plane had been peacefully slicing through the night sky, a quiet metal bird gliding above the Atlantic. Passengers slept curled against windows, flight attendants moved softly between rows, and the cabin hummed with the kind of calm that makes people forget they're flying over an endless ocean. But calm can shatter faster than glass. A sudden, violent tremor struck the aircraft, jolting cups, rattling seats, and waking the cabin with a collective gasp. The lights flickered, luggage compartments creaked, and uneasy whispers filled the air. Then, through the static of the intercom, came a voice trembling so badly it chilled every soul on board. "Ladies and gentlemen, if there is any combat pilot on this aircraft, please come forward immediately." A heavy silence fell, the kind that tightens throats and turns fear into something real. People turned their heads, wide-eyed, searching the faces around them as if a hero might be hiding in plain sight. Mothers clutched their children. A businessman muttered a prayer under his breath. No explanation came, only that desperate plea, echoing again in their minds. And as the storm outside roared louder, hope inside the cabin seemed to flicker, until a woman in row 10 slowly opened her eyes. Row 10 looked like any other, just another seat, another silent passenger trying to disappear into the world. The woman waking there didn't appear extraordinary. Her hoodie was plain, her jeans worn, her hair tied back in a simple knot. She looked like someone on a quiet trip, someone carrying exhaustion heavier than her luggage. Her name was Elena Carter. To the passengers around her, she was nothing more than a stranger with headphones and a half-read book resting on her lap. But inside her lived a past no one could imagine. Elena had once flown F-16s at breathtaking speeds, navigating skies where one wrong move meant never returning home. She had faced missile locks, scorching dogfights, and missions that carved scars deep inside her. 2 years ago, after a mission went horribly wrong, she left the Air Force and vanished into civilian life. That mission had broken something in her, something she never talked about. Tonight, she boarded this flight seeking quiet, maybe forgiveness, or at least a few hours of sleep without nightmares. But when the captain's desperate voice echoed through the cabin, something deep within her stirred awake. Her training, her instincts, her courage, the one she had buried. For several long seconds, Elena sat motionless, listening to the whispers rising around her. Passengers argued softly. What does he mean, combat pilot? Is something wrong with the plane? Oh God, who's going to help? The turbulence answered before she could. The aircraft dropped suddenly, sending screams across the rows as oxygen masks jerked loose and dangled overhead. A child cried. A man shouted for calm. Flight attendants secured themselves, trying to hide their fear behind shaky smiles. Elena's hands trembled not from the storm, but from the memory of the last time she sat in a cockpit fighting to stay alive. That night 2 years ago, when her squadron was ambushed, when she lost people she loved. When she blamed herself, she had sworn she would never fly again. Never touch a control panel. Never trust the sky. But right now, there were nearly 300 souls counting on a miracle, and miracles don't wait. She inhaled deeply, wiped the fear from her eyes, and unbuckled her seatbelt. Standing up felt like lifting a mountain. Passengers stared at her, confused, hopeful, afraid. Without a word, Elena stepped into the aisle. Row 10 was no longer just a seat. It was the beginning of a rescue. The cockpit doors swung open, revealing chaos. Warning lights flashed in every direction, alarms beeped relentlessly. The captain was drenched in sweat, gripping the controls with fading strength, while the co-pilot lay slumped unconscious against the seat, his oxygen mask hanging crookedly. Rain hammered the windshield like 1,000 fists. Lightning carved jagged scars across the sky. The captain looked at her with wide, desperate eyes. "Who are you?" Elena didn't hesitate. "Call sign Viper, United States Air Force." Retired, the captain exhaled a shaky breath, half relief, half disbelief. "Thank God, we've lost autopilot. Hydraulics are failing. Engine 2 is unstable. If I pass out too." "I'll take it," she said firmly, sliding into the co-pilot's seat. Her hands touched the controls like they were old friends she had abandoned but never forgotten. The plane lurched violently, dropping hundreds of feet in a second. Passengers screamed somewhere behind the locked cockpit door. Elena narrowed her eyes, bracing herself. "You've handled storms like this?" The captain asked. Elena tightened her grip. "I've handled worse," and with that, Viper returned, not the woman running from her past, but the pilot who had once danced with death in the open sky. Minutes turned into what felt like hours as Elena wrestled the crippled aircraft through the heart of the storm. Wind slammed against the wings hard enough to tilt the plane. Lightning illuminated terrified faces in the cabin. Every control she touched felt heavier than the last, but she refused to let go. Then, through sheets of rain, she spotted a faint glow, stretching like a lifeline. An emergency air base runway, Delta 473, she called into the radio. "This is Viper, requesting immediate landing clearance." Static cracked. Then a voice replied, steady and confident, "Copy that, Viper, you're clear. We're with you." The plane descended, fighting her every inch of the way. Crosswinds shoved it sideways. Engines sputtered. Warning alarms screamed like banshees. "Steady, steady," she whispered, guiding the aircraft with every last ounce of skill and strength she had. The wheels hit the runway hard. The plane bounced once, then again, skidding dangerously before finally slowing. Then stopping. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then the cabin erupted in applause, sobs, prayers. The captain looked at her with tears in his eyes. "You saved 300 lives," Elena shook her head softly. "They saved me, and maybe, for the first time in years, she believed it." As the passengers finally began to file out of the aircraft, some limping, some still shaking, every single one of them turned back at least once to look at the woman who had saved them. Elena stood near the cockpit door, exhausted, her hands still trembling, her hoodie damp with sweat and rain. People reached out to touch her shoulder, whispering, "Thank you. You're a miracle. You're our angel." A little girl from row 14 ran up and wrapped her arms around Elena's leg, her small voice trembling as she said, "I knew you'd save us." For a moment, Elena couldn't speak. She simply knelt, hugged the girl tightly, and let the warmth of that gratitude fill the empty space she had been carrying inside her for years. Outside, emergency lights flashed across the wet runway, illuminating the night sky as if honoring the quiet heroes standing in their glow. Elena looked up at the plane she had just landed, the same sky she once feared, the same sky she once ran from, and, for the first time, it didn't feel like a memory she needed to escape. It felt like a part of her returning home. Life has a strange way of calling us back to who we truly are, sometimes at the exact moment we least expect it. Tonight, a woman who wanted nothing more than to disappear ended up saving 300 lives. Not for glory, not for recognition, but because courage doesn't vanish, it just waits for the moment it's needed. Row 10 will never be remembered as just a seat again. It will be remembered as the place where a sleeping angel woke up and reminded the world that heroes can be hidden anywhere. And maybe, just maybe, you're sitting next to one right now. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope today. And remember, sometimes the strength that saves us all is sitting quietly, waiting to be called.